Thunderstorm season. That's the summertime here in Quebec, and our next guest says that as the years go by with climate change, we will be experiencing more severe thunderstorms. George Romanich is an assistant professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences at McGill, and his research is focused on thunderstorms and tornadoes, and he also does research on how wind affects buildings. George, good afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. My pleasure.
As a person, George, who observes thunderstorms, I'm curious to get your thoughts. What's going through your mind just about the intense thunder and lightning that we've seen recently, even just in the last 2 weeks here in Montreal?
Well, it's typical weather associated with cold front that happened to pass over our region. So if you look at the map, there is a high pressure system situated in the Atlantic, and it is really bringing hot and moist air over our regions. And that's why we have humidity index high, because it's warm and it's very, very moist. At the same time, we have this cold air advancing from northwest, and these two air masses collide. Because this cold air is heavier than the warm air from Atlantic, warm air needs to go up. As it goes up, the water vapor condenses, and we get these beautiful but scary thunderstorms.
Do you find them beautiful and scary?
Of course. These are the most powerful clouds that our atmosphere can produce, and I find them fascinating. There is so much dynamics and so much weather in that cloud that I could talk for hours.
And what do you do, Georgie? Do you kind of stand by the window and watch?
That's a good question. Often I do, but more often than then I analyze data from anemometers, radars, lidars, from all kinds of, or from satellites, from all kinds of measurement platform we have.
Okay, so you think this high pressure system is colliding with this cold air. Let me get to work. Let me check the data. What does this mean for your work, Georgia? I mean, you talk about, that hot air, the high pressure system, the humid, moist air. As our oceans are warming up, will this mean more of these collisions between this hot, moist air and cold fronts coming through?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as we anticipate global warming and increase of global temperature, that also means increase of ocean temperature. And that means that the oceans are evaporating more. So we will have even more moisture in the air. More moisture in air means more clouds. For example, when the temperature of air increases for about 1 degree Celsius, air can acquire approximately 7% more vapor, water vapor. So as the climate is changing, and climate in Canada is changing at a rate that is double to global climate change on average, so we should expect more moisture and more precipitation. Now, is that precipitation going to come in the form of thunderstorms, or these long days, precipitation that is very difficult to predict?
Yeah, and what's the implication of that? How significant is it there? You mentioned Canada experiencing global warming at twice the rate of the planet. What are the consequences of that?
Well, the consequences are not uniformly spread across our beautiful and large country. Some parts of the country are going to experience more severe weather and more negative consequences, such as northwest, for example, of Canada, than the southern borders of Canada. Generally, the more north one goes, the higher fluctuations of climate associated with climate change. The more we move towards the equator, the less overall, the less influence people will have.
I know you look specifically as well at buildings. You kind of look at the way cities and places are built. As you research the effects of severe winds on buildings here, how does construction affect the storms that we experience?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, really. So our buildings are designed to sustain certain wind speeds. And as the thunderstorms might increase their frequency in the future, there are types of winds associated with thunderstorms course, known as downbursts, and also known as tornadoes. Tornadoes, most of us heard of them.
Yeah, and people might remember a few years back when trees just were uprooted, that those were called microbursts.
Exactly, bravo. So most buildings are designed for the so-called straight line winds, and not necessarily for severe tornadoes and downbursts. So we will have to look a little bit more closely into design practices that look into non-conventional, these, we call them non-synoptic wind types, winds associated with severe thunderstorms. And that's part of my research. That's what I'm looking into, how buildings, low-rise buildings, high-rise buildings, all kinds of buildings interact with thunderstorm winds in form of microbursts as well as tornadoes.
Yeah, what about lightning? I mean, we can see some pretty tall skyscrapers being built here. I see that the cranes, we're building up here in the city. The taller the building, does that attract lightning?
In principle, yes. So the lightning is a current that is flowing through air. It's a very high current, it can be 10,000, 20,000 amps. And that current basically makes air plasma, and it tries to find the shortest path to the surface, and the shortest path is often, tall building. So there is this saying, lightning never strikes the same place twice. That's completely false. So if you see lightning hitting a tree or a tall building or something like that, you shouldn't say, now I'm going to go there, this is a safe place, lightning will never hit again. So in principle, yes, the taller the object, the higher likelihood of lightning hitting it. But lightning for tall buildings is not a big of an issue because there is lightning protection system that is very good. So when is the last time anyone saw buildings on fire due to lightning? Really not that often, because we have very good protection system.
Yeah, how does the protection system work? What's in place there?
So what is in place is that the current from lightning is transmitted through the wires, through the system into the ground, and then dissipated into ground, into earth.
George, you were mentioning the buildings, and in theory, yet that would attract more lightning. I'm wondering what your thoughts are as we look at urban planning here. Are there conversations going on between experts like yourself and urban planners and city leaders as to how we build cities in these talks of climate change and heat islands and more severe weather that we plan to experience?
Well, I would say yes in theory, but not so much in practice. So when you start reading books and papers, everybody is saying there should be a collaboration between government, private sector, academia in better organizing cities, individual buildings, lifestyle in general. But being in academia, I don't see that much. So it's something that is, nice to say, but in practice, there is not that much, I would say, collaboration, or at least not at the level that, in my opinion, we should have.
Why do you think that's not happening?
Well, I do not know. That's a very good question, but I don't know. Maybe, when you have a job, you just want to do 9 to 5, go home, and not start having some additional inputs that might bring you more work or something like that. I don't know. This is just my... it's a good question, but hopefully it gets a positive answer soon.
George, before I let you go, so, there's a severe thunderstorm watch right now in the Laurentians. We've been seeing a lot of these in recent days. I'm sure we'll see more in the days to come. What can someone do when there's a severe thunderstorm warning or when a thunderstorm hits? What are some points people should keep in mind?
Yeah, so that's a very also good question. So in principle, everybody should check at least once or twice weather forecast, okay? We all live in the atmosphere. There is no escaping it. So you should know what in principle the weather will be like that day. Now, if there is a forecast, it's going to be thunderstorm. Usually the forecast also says, at least qualitatively, what is going to be severity of
appliances in the house?
Well, I should say yes. Yes. Again, all these appliances have very good grounding, but why would you risk it, so to speak? Why would you risk it if there is some malfunctioning in some of the appliances or in your protection system? It rarely happens, but why risk it? Of course, if you see hail outside, you should definitely not go outside. It's a big particles of ice falling from several kilometers above the surface, and they can injure you or kill you in the worst case scenario. And winds are also not a joke. I mean, strong winds can knock down the person. If you see a tornado, try to find shelter in the basement. If you do not have basements and there is a tornado warning, try to go to a neighbor or somebody who has a better built house.
You'd want to be in the lowest level, right?
Exactly. Yes. So these are some of the general advices. Now, we don't get that many in our region, Montreal. We get about 20-25 thunderstorm days per year. This is not the most thunderstorm-prone region in North America. This is nothing compared to Florida, where they have 80-90 thunderstorm days per year. So this is a very good place to live. Because we do experience some of the thunderstorms, so we can see the beauty of these clouds, but not too many of them to be constant threat.
Georgi Romanich, you sound very passionate about your work. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. I have a feeling we'll be speaking again in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
You too. That is Georgi Romanich from the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Studies at McGill University. His research is focused on thunderstorms and tornadoes, and he also does research on how wind affects buildings. And right now, severe thunderstorm watch, not quite a warning, just a watch for the Laurentians. It's sunny right now in Montreal, 29 degrees, feeling like 36.